I'm CaptainPira, and this is the Great to Stash. With a lot of stores closed this year, I started making my cosplays out of my stash fabric, and it made me realize just how much stash fabric that really was. So I'm issuing myself a challenge where I have to try and make as many cosplays as I can out of the hoard before I can buy anything for a new one. To start things off easy, I thought I'd upgrade my Diane cosplay from 7 Deadly Sins from Season 1 build to Season 2. Let's see how much orange fabric we have. I should be able to get just the bodice pieces. The ruffles might start to get a little creative. The back is the only solid large piece, so I think it'll work. I'm gonna go for it. The fabric I'm using came from Anne's Fabric in Hamilton, and it's really cool because it's basically a spandex on the one side, but it's got like a plastic coating that makes it look like a leatherette, but it's also 4-way stretch, which is amazing. Let's get started. The first step is to figure out your pattern pieces. You can break it down. It's basically a shirt with an inset, a collar, and like ruffles at the bottom. It's probably not even a dress. It's not that long. We shouldn't use too much fabric, but the basic shapes that we're going to need most of a shirt, but you kind of take out like the princess seam center panel and make it its own piece. Also going to need the top collar. I'm making it 2 pieces because if I put a closure here, I'll be able to avoid putting a zipper through the back, and plus it makes the 2 silver knobby bits functional. The back, really straightforward, a long shirt to short dress kind of shape. Take the darts in for some shape, because even if you're working with stretch fabric, it's just going to look nicer if you put some darts in to give you the right curves. Whatever's left will be ruffles. If you're drafting your own patterns, the easiest thing to do is to use like a sloper. So I got these from patterncause.com. The sizes don't go up very high. I'm probably the highest size that they offer. It is really nice to be able to just toss this down and know that this is generally the shape of a back if I remember to add the darts and the seam allowance. So the back piece will be basically the top of a skirt sloper and your actual back, and we'll trace out those. We should be able to use the default sleeve holes, and that neckline will work with the collar just fine. The shirt is going to be a little trickier because we're going to want to use this piece for the collar and cut around here for the front bodice. We're going to probably also want the skirt sloper, so we probably want to follow these about and then put our extra panel here. This is like a very gentle bust curve, but for cosplay you want a little more oomph. So I'll probably be adding the curves from another pattern that I use fairly often. And this is actually the Yaya Han bunny suit panel, but it's got a pretty ample bosom. You just want to make sure that you'll be putting it at the waistline. So then these will be separate pieces. And then for the actual collar, using this piece from, I believe, like one of the McCall's corset sets. But let's begin by making the pieces we don't have. I like to use newsprint because if you go to an art store, they're usually like $2 a pad and you get so many sheets. It's great for if you're drafting your own patterns. It's a little harder if you're tracing off a pattern from a commercial one. You might want tracing paper instead. I hold it over the light box instead. It works fine if you're just doing the outside of some other patterns. It's a pretty short skirt. You probably only want it like, if this is my waist, then this might even be too long, but it'll give us something to work with because it's easier to go too big than too small, especially if you're very cautious about how much fabric you have left. I'm just going to stick this right corner to corner because if I don't have to cut or draw as much, why would I? Okay, so that's the skirt front. And this one, I'm going to get the general feel of where this goes to, even though I'm using the other pattern. Kind of be a mix of them both. So this one, the waist is here. Unfortunately, these are opposite of each other, but just try and line up waist lines. Then you probably want to follow this dart, but just to move it over. If you have one of these rollers with the hole in the middle, that can be very helpful for something like this. So you can see they're relatively in the same place. Now this is going to be, like, deciding where this goes is probably the hardest part. Because this edge we can edit, but this edge is pretty much set. So you want to check where it's going to come to you on you, and I think this is probably where it's comfortable, which is in fact the bottom of the dart. So then I'm going to want that and square it off. So then that's kind of a weird shape. Put the armhole back in. And it doesn't actually need to go that high, I just want to make sure that we have the option. So let's cut out this part. I'm going to cut this with a little extra until I figure out what's happening with my collar piece. Because again, it's better to have too much than too little. It's a little strange, but here's our piece. We'll be cutting that on the fold. Make a note. The front piece from the Ayahan pattern, probably going to want this piece to basically come out from here. And the size of this piece can't change because it needs to fit in this keyhole nicely later. But this has a lot of like front allowance we don't actually need. So I should be able to just line this up with about the edge. And it doesn't actually have a deep V. Probably gonna want a little very slight scoop instead. And then we'll join those. Tape them together. Correct this curve. They don't really fit right now. That's the extra we've added. They should allow you to see how it joins up. You still need the neckline. In a lot of the art, it looks asymmetrical. Sometimes on cosplays they have them straight across, but I'm going to try for the asymmetrical. It's lower this way, and that would justify the button here if that's where it opens, and the button here where it connects to the rest of the dress. You want to look into a mirror, kind of like place it where the seams ought to be, and then just, this is where the bust is going to. This needs like a little bit of skin in between here or so, and we want to kind of low on the one side but kind of high on the other. And then we can just put the lines across. It's lower on your left side, higher on your right. This is going to affect where it joins on your main bodice. Take the body base for reference where these armholes are going. So yeah, this guess was pretty close for the low one, but the high side is going to need at least a centimeter to create a little more space. This should be what you're looking at for your front of the dress, as well as ruffles at the bottom, which will probably just be rectangles. And you're also going to want to account for an overlap here if you're going to open it in the front like me. Your back piece is just your back sloper and the top of the skirt panel. Let's get cutting. One of the most important things is which way the stretch is. This is a 4-way stretch, but it does seem to stretch more this way throughout the length of the fabric rather than across. So then I'm going to want more stretch on the horizontal part of my body. Also, this was a remnant. I have to look out for any imperfections in the fabric. I had to cut around a lot of these dark patches. Generally, I'd want to fold this up and cut my pieces 2 at a time. And it's real convenient if you can do it on the center fold, but because we're going this way, also want to watch out for how far from the edge. With a lot of these textured things, the edge is a lot thicker than you'd think. Also, it sticks to itself. The back is all one piece, so let's just start with that. Try and get, again, as much out of this fabric as possible. Fold it as close to the edges as possible and still lining up. Okay, I'm going to just use weights. You should use chalk or some other material to trace around your outlines, but I'm lazy. A lot of times the chalk will pull at your fabric, put weights on things, and just make sure that the fabric doesn't shift. You're also going to want to cut a little around your sloper if you haven't calculated in the seam allowance. And honestly, this is probably further than I need it to be, but better safe than sorry. You're going to want to put your darts in before you move them, and hopefully not moving the fabric too much. And I'm probably not even going to cut them, I'm probably just going to sew them first and then see where it's safe to cut them. This should be the back panel, and it's pretty short. It does not cover my butt. We're going to have at least like 2 hands worth of ruffles, 4 inches. Awkward piece of fabric left. All of our other pieces are smaller, so that will be less of an issue. Let's see if we can get the front panel out of this. Cutting it on the fold, plenty of space for this. Hips take up a lot of space. Thanks for like a finger or 2 to that connection. Remember to add your seam allowance. Don't just cut it right at your stencil unless you worked it into your pattern ahead of time. If you have really similar pieces, you should label what they are. I'm not going to mistake this. I think I'm going to fix this. If you're using a weird edge, you really have to be sure that it's going to work on both the front and the back. Because I added a lot of seam allowance the last piece, I probably don't need too much seam allowance on this one. This part shouldn't need seam allowance at all. It has the divots for opening in the front, so get me one of these pieces. I'll get one of them here. This is the right side. You have to be way more aware than me. I can get it right between this stain and this stain. Our collar piece should get pretty close. I'm gonna want a second of these pieces face down. These 2 pieces. Yeah. Turn it to the folds. Now we have enough for the ruffles. Basically have from here to here. Probably want around 90 inches. 56, 112. Actually draw an edge this time. We're going to want to cut this in half. They're 6.5 inches right now, but they're probably going to lose a ½ inch once they join, and hem in the end are only going to be from there to there. That long at the end of it. Here, it's 27. Be 54. Be 108. I mean, I needed 90 as a minimum. I probably wanted like closer to 120. I think this will be livable. Just if you cut it down the center, you really want to keep checking that the alignment hasn't shifted. Our ruffle panels gathered a little, not this much. Collar pieces trimmed as a whole once I have more of the garment assembled. Our collar for flares, you might see the inside of it sometimes. The front panel, our main front piece, back of our garment, which will need the darts still. If it looks like this, you're probably ready to sew. So now that all the pieces are cut out, you're going to want to pin them together, but you're going to get holes anywhere you put a pin. I like to use these little binder clips. You can hold the pieces together. You don't leave any little marks. This material might gunk up your machine or make the needle sticky, which is even more likely to cause this kind of a tear effect. One step to counter that is to toss some masking tape on the plate of your sewing machine, and that will help the side that faces down. But if you're top stitching and you have like both sides or the front side, you're going to want more newsprint. Cut strips the size of your ruler. You can feed them under the machine right along your seams. The thinner you cut them, the better you can see your work underneath, which is really important. I'm going to start with the bodice. To start with the inside center point, and you're going to want right sides together. You want this slightly to overlap. Should be relatively well set now. Time to switch to sewing. Set it to stretch stitch on my machine. is these guys, which you can get to by setting S1 or S2. Although for this stitch I could probably get away with basting it to make sure I like how it sits first. Folds went a little weird. If I do the top stitching I intended, they lay nice and flat. You cut your threads as you go, you're less likely to just have one surprise be sticking out at a weird place. It's better. It is a wrinkled mess, but it's better. And this is where recording cut out because my craft room was 35 degrees Celsius and humid, and that's a little much for my recording software, but I'll fill you in. Once your front panel is assembled, you're going to want to connect it to your back panel by clipping down the sides and then doing a stretch stitch. Once you have kind of your torso together, you can probably start by taking in the darts at the back. Stitching here, you get a bit of a diamond shape cut out. Once both sides are together, you're going to start the collar. And for that, you join at the shoulders the way you would to the front panel of your shirt. And to add the collar, you sew your two pieces together, find the center of your collar piece and the center of your back, and then pin them out along the curves. It won't sit flat from that point because they're alternating curves, but that's what makes it stand up once you're wearing it. Also for my collar, I wanted it to join at the front for ease of wear, and I stitched snaps to either side. So next we're going to fold over the collar and just clip it in place, sew along, then try it on again to decide where it goes with the actual color. Even with the top collar piece just clipped in place, it's already fitting significantly better, but the next step is stitching these down. I have two sets to pick from. These guys are a little more fun. I think I'm gonna go with these. It just has more of the spirit of the artwork. The button is just for decoration. Generally sewing something like snaps, you want it to be as invisible as possible, so I'm going to try and anchor as many in the actual stitching as I can. Try it on and decide where the collar top falls. Mine, I didn't actually hem until I could try it on and decide how high I wanted it, especially with the asymmetrical. To join these sides, if you can hide it as much as possible in seams that already exist, it's just going to look cleaner. And then I've added my second button on the strap to again give it the appearance of a function. So it fits. Our collar is sitting pretty well. For the ruffles, we have our two strips of fabric, and I'm going to start by joining them together, right sides together, where the texture stops. I'll proceed to just like hem it all the way around. Probably a double fold because the side will be flipping up occasionally. I cut a bunch of newsprint into strips. I can just stick it along the hem and feed it through the machine. It should go a lot smoother this time. Hold it up to the light, you can kind of see where it stops on both of them. Checking. Lined up pretty well. I'm going to turn this down. Make sure that your two sides don't get twisted. Since this is a smooth line and it's consistent, it's going to be more of a pin as you go, fold as you go situation. Now that the ruffle loop is done, pin it around the circumference of the bottom of the dress. When I say pin, I mean clips. This fabric is fussy. You can probably do like a base and a gather. I usually mark off a halfway point, which is easy when your ruffle is only 2 panels. And then I just divide it all in half. This is not the fastest method. In fact, it's probably actually the slowest. It's relaxing. Just kind of zone out and pin. I do normally do this with actual pins, but I think if we get something a little more box pleaty, that's gonna work out okay. Once all your pins are set, you're going to want to decide which way the ruffles lay. You want to fold them that direction ahead of time. I think I'm going to go alternating again for a bit more of a box pleat. So after final fits, it's looking pretty good. And here's the final fit. Good work. Now you too can upgrade from season 1 to season 2. See you next time. If you liked this video, tell me who you want to see next. Show me how your version came out. Or if you need clarification on the 2 hours of dropped video, feel free to message me and I'm sure I can help you out. Thanks for watching. PVC in 35 degrees. Oh, it was recording already. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.